So NMIXX, right? I have a lot of conflicting feelings about this group. If you were to ask me, which girl group am I really keeping an eye out, and I think the highest of, I would probably say NMIXX. But I would also have to confess to you that I don't have very high hopes for their future releases, and a lot of things have held me back from actually standing them. Now, before I get too deep into it, I should just put it out there, in case anyone forgets, this is a subjective matter. My opinion is not objective in any sense. You may think completely different to me. However, I'm only reacting to what is being released, and I can't help but to be disappointed. So to really understand my point, I think I need to start from a broader context than just their most recent release, right? A big gripe that I have with this group is that the people behind them, and when I say that, I mean the writers, producers, or maybe even the subdivision they are under who are choosing these people to work with NMIXX, cannot or will not just commit to the music. And frankly, I think that's where a lot of people are feeling held back from supporting this group. From the people I interact with online, a lot of them say that, out of all of the K-pop girl groups, or maybe just, the generation entirely, NMIXX is definitely extremely talented, but they release so much music that is polarizing and, quite frankly, from release to release, doesn't seem to appeal to the same sort of audience, which will ultimately sabotage them in the long run. And when I'm talking about, the audience that they want to appeal to, that is a very, very important part for any artist. Knowing who your demographic is and making sure that the music you release ends up actually appealing to that group of people. With NMIXX's discography, though, it feels wildly scattered. If I think back to OO or Tank, which I think was a single album, wasn't it? And I compare it to Love Me Like This, I cannot imagine those two songs having a similar reception to the same audience. The genre is different, the song structure is different, the musicality is different, vocal deliveries are different. So what ends up happening is that people who were maybe into, OO and have stuck with NMIXX, through their early releases, see something like Love Me Like This or See That, which is their newest title track, and they get kind of confused. They're like, this isn't what I signed up for. I signed up for mix pop. This isn't what I wanted. They could possibly stop supporting NMIXX. On the other side of that, maybe you were there when NMIXX debuted and you weren't really that into it, but later along the line, they release Love Me Like This, and you're like, this is it. This is the turnaround point. JYP and their producers, and I'm talking about JYP, the company, by the way, not the person, have finally figured out what they want to do with NMIXX. It was really successful. And because it brought them so much money, it clearly means that they're going to keep going down this road. Except they didn't really do that. And now people who have followed them, from Love Me Like This are disappointed with their later releases, but maybe they're happier with something like See That. So basically what ends up happening by doing this is that they're cultivating two sides of their fan base. Or more. But for simplicity's sake, I'm going to use two. Meaning that whenever they release another project, they're going to have two opposing sides asking for different things. One side wants their, harsher songs, the mix pop, their experimental and aggressive tracks. Whereas the other side wants something a little bit more low-key, chill, and frankly brighter. And no matter what they release, if they happen to lean towards one side more than they do the other, they're going to end up appeasing that side of the fan base, but they're also going to end up pissing off the other side. Maybe pissed off is a little strong, but they'll end up disappointed with the product they end up getting. And I honestly think that's why K-pop groups tend to have congruent title tracks and diversify in their B-sides. Because in the public perception, when most people just focus on the title tracks, it's easier to see the growth and the execution of a particular concept. An outsider looking into NMIXX's title tracks, where most of the focus is on, is going to get very confused. However, despite all that, it seemed like their earlier mini album from this year, Break, really treaded the line and appealed to everybody, even to the naysayers outside of the fan base. Especially Dash, the title track, was really widely celebrated. I didn't see anybody shitting on it, which is like a miracle for NMIXX. I myself put Break as the K-pop album of the year. For 2024, I think that Break is the perfect representation of like, maybe not a 10 out of 10, maybe a 9.5 out of 10. Break the Wall could have been like a little bit better, hit a little bit harder, but from start to finish, I do think it's, you know, the most clean-cut project that we've seen out of the K-pop scene this year. Obviously, that goes with saying that there have been groups who have been releasing bangers this year, and I'm not trying to deny that. I'm just saying that Break is number one. And with how fucking good the project was, and it was really fucking good. I said before that I didn't stan them, and I still don't, but I went out of my way to go buy the album just because I wanted a CD of this thing. I didn't care about the photo cards, I didn't care about the album, I didn't care about the posters, I just wanted a CD of this thing so I could save it for future generations. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the point. And I think I had a similar reaction to when I listened to Love Me Like This. Like, clearly, you know, this should have been a sign to people behind the scenes that this is where the gold mine was. This is the niche that NMIXX can fill and that no other group can touch. And I think it was probably as ideal as it could have been, because out of all of the tracks, you know, on the mini album, none of them were like completely similar to each other. Like, they weren't all of the same vibe or concept, which really meant that NMIXX could start branching out from those ideas. And I think I should have learned my lesson with Love Me Like This and the later releases, because when I went to go look up NMIXX's title track for their third mini album, I didn't even know they released something. I found out just by chance on like YouTube search today. And I happened to go look at it, and I cannot tell you how ecstatic I was. I know a lot of people have been riffing on the title track saying it's not as good as Dash, which it isn't, but I think as a follow-up, I think it really does serve its purpose. I've listened to it over and over again since then, and I think I've really solidified my love for this song. So I cannot explain how I fell from cloud nine, basically, when I went and searched up the entire mini album. I don't think I've ever had my heart sink in like the first minute of a song like I did with Sika, because I had a debilitating realization of what this mini album was going to be. Now, I don't think anyone's going to be shocked when I say that NMIXX is mainly a vocal group. Even the other positions, the rappers, dancers, they all have amazing vocal ability. Not to say that the rappers aren't good, mind you, they are, but they are good in a K-pop context. Meaning that when there are like, you know, some 4 bars that they need to deliver in the middle of a song, they can execute it and execute it well. This ability does not lend itself to carrying an entire rap song by themselves. And it's made very clear with this song, because this is meant to be a rap song and their rappers are meant to stand out and shine, and they simply do not. And the fact that the rappers of this group do not have the chops to carry a song on their back is only emphasized more by the feature that they have on this list. By the name of Kid Millie, I believe. I'm not familiar with him. But when you compare his delivery, which I will even say wasn't like spectacular, it wasn't like the best I'd ever heard, but even just comparing him and the rappers of this group on their track, on the one that he is featuring on, he kind of overshadowed them. Even the hook, even like the line that is being delivered from the members who are meant to be, you know, more focused on vocals, isn't really delivered in the way that it should be. And if you're confused on which line I'm talking about, it's the one that ends with the dragged out Sika. Like, again, I don't even know who he is, but Kid Millie is the only one who really delivers on that line. I think the way it's meant to be. If we want to get into like the technical sense of the instrumental and everything, I do think if I had to pick one word for it, it would be underdeveloped. I think that there's a lot of interesting elements there that I wish they would have played with more, because like as an intro to the song, it was like, it caught my ear really quickly, but like by the end of it, and it's only like 2 minutes and 40 seconds, I think the entire song is, by the end of it, I was like, yep, I know this beat for beat. I don't, like, there's nothing else to see here. There's nothing else to grab me. And that's a point I'll elaborate more on later in the video. But let's keep going through the list. The next song, Red Light Sign, But We Go, carries on much of the same issues I had with Sika. In the first few plays of the song, I found myself liking it. That being said, I really don't like the chorus. I really don't like the sound, the synth that they were using. I wish I was more knowledgeable about the technical terms, but it's almost like a staticky sound that they use behind the members' voices, and without it, it would basically be like an empty chorus. No, it was irritating. I did not like it at all. For the rest of the song, I think it was definitely a step up. I think my favorite part was definitely the post-chorus, but even then, the blown out, like, horn or synth that they were using got old very quickly. So while I appreciated it on the first few listens, it got old very quickly. This is a song that does not have a lot of, replay value. And this is also where I started to notice that there was like a concerning lack of vocals in the song so far. I don't know why I didn't notice it. Not to say that I didn't notice it before this point. I remember listening to see that and just kind of keeping a mental note that there wasn't as much like vocal bombastics as there usually are for a group like NMIXX. But I also considered the instrumental of the song, the vibe of it, and I think they were trying to go for something a bit more low key. So I was like, okay, it's fine. But here in this particular song, like an electric dance song is basically what it is. And I was like, why are they delivering the lines like that? Like, don't get me wrong. They've definitely had, songs where they're not being so vocally heavy and they're delivering lines with sort of a cut and dry punctionality. But the way they did it here was like so devoid of energy, and not in like a laid back, cool sort of sense where they're playing off the aloofness for the audience, like it's part of the performance or the song. It actually just sounds super lackluster. And then we move on to the next track, which is, if I'm honest, the only track I'm probably going to be saving off of this mini album other than the title track, which is Beat Beat. This is the only song where they really come through on the vocals like I wanted them to, like I expected them to, which might be the whole crux of my issue. Again, I'll talk about it later. In every sense, I think this is the best B-side out of this mini album. The vocals are coming through, the instrumental is coming through, and not just like in a basic sense. I really liked how, and while this might be common, I still appreciated it here, how they actually introduced the instrumental to imitate the BPM and the feeling of a heart beating, which was like the whole premise of this song, right? The beat is a heartbeat. However, it's because of that concept and the fact that they repeat dari dari dum, I think that's what it is, so much in this song. It's really hard for me not to compare it to Run for Roses on Break. And I really don't want to keep making comparisons between the two albums because, one, I think it's unfair, and number two, I think it's getting repetitive. But I have to, because this is meant to be the sequel to that album. So my gripes thus far with the album have been, I haven't seen an exploration of the same themes from the first album. I've only seen their derivative. So if you were to ask me, I think that like Beat Beat might have been like a prototype of Run for Roses or something. Like there seems to be some sort of connection they're trying to make. And as much as I enjoyed this track, it does not stack up to any of the B-sides on Break, just being completely honest. And for the last two tracks, I mean, I remember first listening to this album, and this is the point where I was like really demoralized, and even listening to the last two tracks didn't really change my opinion much, but I might as well put it anyway. For Moving On, I'm not really a fan of like pop rock crossovers in K-pop, just because a lot of them tend to do this very generic versions when mixing the two genres. Not to say that happens every single time. There are definitely cases where they come out with something really unique, which adds to their discography, but this is no, just no. Love is Lonely was fine. Like it wasn't bad. It was fine. So now that I've done the whole mini album recap, I think it's time that I get back to the core issue of what I was talking about before. This album was fine, and that is all it was. It was fine. I think because of this album's mediocrity, it almost like enrages me a little bit that I kind of want to put it below Admire, which was their first single album, right? I liked Oh, I didn't like Tank. I actually really hate Tank. I have no love for that song. And so I would even put it below that because at least OO and Tank had something to say. They had a message. They had an objective to accomplish. Whether you liked it or not, they were trying to send out a message of who NMIXX were as a group. And this mini album, Stick Out, did none of that. I think I want to return to that comment I made about how all of these tracks feel like a derivative of Break. Because I don't know if I can say it any better than that. This mini album feels like they wanted the same magic, but didn't want to commit to the same amount of experimentation and risk. And in doing so, there are so many elements, throughout the songs. And I mentioned it here and there that I liked about it. The instrumental, the production, the vocals, all of these elements had potential in each of the songs, but none of them came to fruition because all of them were frankly playing it safe and were underdeveloped. And yet, NMIXX is just that group that no matter how many critiques I have for them, no matter how many, negative comments I might say, I keep coming back to them. I truly have like this love-hate relationship with this group. You know what? No, I don't even want to say that much. It's not that I hate them, because I don't. And I don't want to make this sound like it's doomsday or something. Like, this is not the end of NMIXX. This is not the fall off that people want it to be. And I certainly don't think that NMIXX have peaked. I'm sure in later releases, they'll have something that is equally, if not better, than Break. However, I don't know if I, as a fan, am willing to stick around to find out. I feel like being in this limbo, in this purgatory, if you will, in this in-between place of just like, I'm living for what they're doing, and yet I'm also wanting so much more for them. This whole conundrum makes me feel the same way I do about Danganronpa. Danganronpa? Am I really going down? Am I doing this? You know what? Fuck it. Danganronpa. For those that don't know, don't worry, I'll explain very briefly. It's a game series of basically visual novels of murder mysteries, right? That's all the information that you need to know. And I hold those games in such high regard, but I'm also keenly aware that they have issues and problems that are hard to ignore. There are very obvious chinks in the armor, places to improve, and ultimately don't need that much to see their full potential recognized. And yet, every single time I'm there for a release, whether that be the game or the music, I find myself watching as these entities shoot themselves in the foot. And at the end of the day, I find myself asking, what am I doing here? Why don't I just go to another group, another game that will give me what I'm looking for? And the answer is simply because there is none. If we're talking about a game like Danganronpa, there is no murder mystery game that has the same kind of setup, payoff, characters, writing, gameplay, and comedy that it does. I feel the same way about NMIXX. I don't think that other groups are capable of what they are capable of. Whether that goes to songwriting, song production, vocals, and being an all-around stunning group. And here I remain, stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think this discrepancy is only exemplified by the fact that I feel like in every other facet they've improved. Like, I was going over the performance video, I was watching like the styling that they have for this comeback. Oh my god, the styling. I'm sorry, I know this is kind of off topic, but I need to talk about Bae. Is that how you say her name? I'm afraid I'm butchering it. Like, I'm a very easy woman, okay? If you just like dress in black, have black eyeliner, that's really all you need. I'm not gonna lie. I haven't had an idol stun me this like badly before in a long time. I paused the video as I was watching it and I had to take a minute and like process what I was watching. I don't think y'all understand. It was too much. And by the way, this is not just me singling her out. Well, I guess it kind of is. They all looked good, but her in particular, it was too much for my heart, okay?
But then he took his shirt off and I went, like, I actually had, like, my body had a reaction with those tattooes.
I don't need to know about that. You keep that to yourself.
Anyway, I returned to the point I was talking about. I feel so let down with this comeback, and I think it might be my own fault, which is even harder to acknowledge, right? As great as Break was, maybe I set up too much expectations for what this mini album was going to be. I knew, like, deep down in my heart that it was unlikely that they were going to reach the heights that I had set up for them and that they had reached in Break. But I didn't imagine them falling so below the kind of parameters that I had set up for them. And again, I feel like I have to reiterate this. I'm not saying that the songs are bad. Like, if I see someone putting on one of these songs to listen to in like their playlist or something, I'm not gonna side eye them. Like, okay, yeah, it makes sense, but it's just so average, which almost makes it like more of an offense to me, just because I know how out there NMIXX can be. I know how crazy they can get with it, and maybe I'm not always vibing with what they have, but like I can appreciate the boldness in which they put themselves out there. But like with this release, it's like, I don't know what am I supposed to do with this? Anyway, those are my thoughts on their newest mini album, Stick Out. Let me know how you guys were feeling about it. Like I said at the beginning of this video, this is a subjective matter. This might be your album of the year, and you know, more power to you. I really want to know what y'all think just about the mini album in general, but also NMIXX, right? That's it from me for now. See y'all later. Bye-bye.